Okay, in this PowerPoint, we're going to look at how we can define life. So we know that biology is technically defined as the study of life, but what I want to know is what is life. So your job in about 60 seconds is to go to this text box that I have on your OneNote. If you're following along in this PowerPoint, next to this slide, you'll see that I have a text box that says list the characteristics of life as you believe them to be. So take about 60 seconds and just list as many as you can. Try to get at least 5. Scientists say that there are actually 8. So if you can get 8, that's even better. And then you'll see that I put a link in there to a Padlet that I'd actually like you to go to and post your responses so that we can share with the class what you think life is. So you can pause this, take 60 seconds to complete that, and then when ready, you can keep playing. So one of the other things that we have to realize is what are the elements on the periodic table that make up living organisms. Out of the 119 or so identified elements, there's only a few that are actually found in life. And out of the few that are found, there are 4 that are always found. And those would be carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. All life is composed of that. Later in a unit, we'll talk about the chemistry of life, or the chemistry of biology if you prefer, and we'll be dealing with these different elements. Another issue that is brought up before we can actually go on and talk about the characteristics of what makes up a living organism is we need to distinguish between what we call biotic factors and abiotic factors and how they can influence what life actually is and the types of diversity that we can find in living organisms. Biotic, very simply, is the living components of an ecosystem. Things such as what we would call heterotrophs and autotrophs. Those heterotrophs are the organisms that have to consume other animals or plants, whereas autotrophs would be the green plants that can actually produce their own nutrients. So examples could be different green plants versus animal life that we know it. The biotic factors are usually organized in terms of a food chain, a hierarchy, with producers being the autotrophs at the lowest level and the consumers moving up, whether they are a first order consumer, which is generally herbivores, second order, which are carnivores, and third order, which are the top of the line, which are also carnivores. That falls into the realm of what we call ecology, which we don't really deal with much in this class. We will be dealing, that's something that if you're interested in, Dr. Chambers teaches an environmental science class that you could, if you're not a senior, you can take in your senior year. We will focus mostly on general biology in here. The abiotic factors to me are very important because they actually really truly determine what life can exist in a certain area. And I do like to spend a little bit of time on them. So this would be the non-living components of a system. They influence life in various different ways. Some examples could be water, sunlight, oxygen, and the temperature, as well as soil. All of these will impact how and what kind of life may be found. I'm going to use water as an example here to illustrate how it can determine what living organisms are present, or if we even have living organisms. Water is necessary for all life to exist. All life processes are carried out in a water type environment. It's our major solvent in chemistry for living organisms, and without water, of course, you wouldn't have life. That's what they're always looking for, I think, when they're exploring other regions in space, such as Mars. The first thing they want to see is if there's water present, because that has to be present if we're going to find any living organisms, as well as any other potential space bodies that we may see later. Another factor about water is that it's about 65% of our total body. So if you were to desiccate a living organism, you would lose about 65% of its mass because we would remove the water. And for plants, without water, photosynthesis couldn't occur. Even though they may have chlorophyll, of course, if a plant doesn't have water, most of you know if you don't water your plants, they're not going to survive. And this is the main reason that plants need water, is that they can actually process photosynthesis. So you can see from this example on water, it's pretty important. Well, so are the other abiotic factors that I have listed over there, such as sunlight, oxygen, temperature, and soil. So what I'm going to ask you to do is you're going to complete this assignment that you will find in your OneNote called the abiotic factors. And what you will do is you will research the 4 remaining abiotic factors, sunlight, oxygen, temperature, and soil, and you will see how they influence how life can develop. So you can see how I used water that I just gave you in the notes as an example, how I put it into the table. And then what I would do is I would also have to verify your information by a source. Everything, of course, since we are college oriented, we have to have sources for all of our information. So that would probably be at this point a website that you've researched this. So you can look up sunlight, but you need to be specific in how you're going to research it. It's how sunlight influences life is how I would do it. That's how I looked up water. Water influences life, how? Something like that in a Google search. So what I'm asking, and you can see with the characteristics of water, I had at least 3. I put down 3 different bits of information. I would expect at least 3 or more for each one of these different abiotic factors, such as sunlight, oxygen, temperature, and soil. This will be a checkpoint in Summit when we start Summit. I plan on starting Summit probably next week, getting onboarding into it. If you don't know how, I haven't assigned this project out yet, and we'll go from there. I'm kind of holding back on doing Summit until I know for sure if we're going to be still in distance learning or if we're going to be coming back in a hybrid model in school, which will be a little bit different. So for right now, your job is to complete this abiotic factor assignment on here. If necessary, you can re-watch this, or the notes are also posted right here on this page in your OneNote.